as promised, David Haugh is with us. He wrote for the Chicago Tribune for 17 years, and his In the Wake of the News column was a column I never missed. He then joined The Score in 2018, where he now co-hosts the very popular Mully and Haugh show. And he, as of September 30th, has started working over at CHSN. David, I want to start there. Tell us about the new network, what it's about, and what your role is in developing that network.
Well, thanks for having me. First of all, I really appreciate the chance to talk and about everything. This summer I was basically doing the thing at The Score with the Mully and Haugh show, and news of this network kind of launched, and they reached out to me about see if I would be interested in doing some variation of a talk show and a Bears show. I had worked part-time for NBC Sports Chicago, where we did Football Night in Chicago. I had a long relationship with NBC Sports Chicago in a variety of different roles, going back to Chicago Tribune Live a long time ago when it was CSN Sportsnet. So the people launching the new network, Jason Coyle, Brooks Boyer, Mike McCarthy was involved. They reached out to me, guys who I had known along the way, and came with a very, attractive opportunity. It's exciting to be part of something that's launching, kind of a startup, even though there's a lot of carryover from NBC Sports Chicago. They didn't know at first what exactly role I would play. Now we've got the big pro football show that I co-host every day with Ruthie Polinsky and Clay Harbor 3 days a week, and he's in there 3 days a week and does a great job. And then the Chicago Lead with Brooke Fletcher and Cam Smith. And I'll have to say this, it is a startup. Not everything has gone according to plan with the carriage, and I can't answer those questions about Comcast, so thank you for asking. But I'll say that, the people that I've worked with, their attitudes are great. It's a tremendous environment. I'm really fortunate to be surrounded by people that are really easy to work with, and I really enjoy that part of the job. My radio gig is still so much fun and rewarding, but once I take a nap and work out in the middle of the day, I look forward to going to the TV thing at night.
Yeah, I was going to mention, when do you find time to sleep? So naps are a good thing. I actually, I don't get the show and the network here at home because I've got Comcast, but I was actually at a bar restaurant recently and it was playing there. And so I told my wife, I need to check some of this out. And I went over to the bar and it was a great episode. I'm sorry that I'm not getting it home. I hope that's all worked out soon so it becomes easily available to all Chicago sports consumers. All right,
I think that's the challenge right now.
It is a challenge. I mean, it's a very tough media landscape, and I want to ask you some more questions about the media, but let's quickly turn our attention to the Chicago Bears right now. That press conference with Ryan Poles and Kevin Warren, I thought was an utter disaster. The fact that Kevin Warren elbowed his way to the start of that and started talking about I am still proud to lead this franchise. I expected days like this, made it seem like he thought of Ryan Poles as the assistant general manager, and he was now president, executive vice president, and GM. Did you get that same impression?
Well, I definitely got the impression that there was no doubt about who was in charge. I think that Kevin Warren was brought to the Bears to be the chief executive and really have everybody report to him, and that was a change in Ryan Poles' hierarchy. I don't think it was one necessarily that Ryan Poles welcomed, but he's adjusted to. There's a definite mentorship going on with Kevin Warren and his pupil, Ryan Poles. So I know that Kevin Warren rubs many people the wrong way. Here's what he has in terms of an opportunity still. He can change a lot of people's minds. He has two projects that are now massive in the future of the Chicago Bears. One, the stadium project that he was brought to the Bears and Halas Hall to fix and to direct. And two, the coaching search that he has maybe, I don't want to say hijacked, but certainly taken over. And I think that when you look at what's ahead of him, he can still do a very adequate, if not exceptional job at making the right decision with the stadium project and hiring the right football coach. Now, as he does that, is he going to turn some people off with his style? Absolutely, because this is Chicago and people are going to have strong opinions and people love the Bears. But I do think that, as you describe it, you're not alone, and I'm aware of that. But I do think that, I don't want to review the movie midway through it. I think that if this ends up with the right coach, the process can sometimes be clunky. The Bears lead the league in clumsy. And I think that you have to wait and see who the final pick is and how the project with the stadium finishes up. So I'm not going to dispute your characterization of it, because you definitely weren't on an island there. But I do think that over time, Kevin Warren has an opportunity to do things the right way.
Now, General Manager Ryan Poles does have the in his contract that he hires and fires coaches. So what I am sensing here is that there could be some rift between the two of them, because Warren did make it clear that he was going to spend hours every day with Poles. And there are reports that Poles is not happy about the fact that he now has to report to Kevin as opposed to management. I do a show with Greg Gabriel, the former scouting director of the Chicago Bears. He said that the GM job was always sought after because of that relationship. There is no president, there is no middleman, and but now that appears to have gone. What are your thoughts on that whole situation?
Well, I know where you're coming from, and I respect everybody's quest to find that little rift between executives, because it's always great drama and there's tremendous stories. And I've written my share and certainly talked about enough of them. But I'd say this: Ryan Poles is a general manager that has presided over a football team that's gone 14-33 during his tenure. You could make the argument that he's probably lucky to still have a job. So if that job involves reporting to a team president rather than a team owner, then get used to it, and do the best job that you can, because you really have lost the right to complain somewhere between the 32nd and the 33rd loss. You aren't in a position where I think you have a ton of strength, because you've put together football teams that have had multiple losing streaks, in consecutive years. And so I think he's done a pretty good overall job. I think there have been some hits and misses like any general manager, but now is not the time to have him, have this sort of turf war. Now is the time where he needs to figure out what's gone wrong and how to fix it.
Very well said. When Thomas Brown held his press conferences as offensive coordinator and then as head coach prior to the San Francisco 49ers game, I fell in love with his command of the room, how he spoke, his football phrases that it seemed like they were his very own.
Competitive greatness is being at your best when your best is required.
Unfortunately, the results Sunday didn't spell out, this is your obvious candidate for head coach. Do you think that he still has a chance to prove, or do you that he should be head coach, or do you think that perhaps that ship is quickly sailing away?
I think it's an uphill climb. It's unfortunate for Thomas Brown, but he's been put in a very difficult situation. People make a lot of the fact that he was promoted 3 times, I think, in 19 days, but I don't know any of us that would have said, no, don't do this, it's going too fast. All of us probably would have said, give me more, give me more, give me more. And I respect that about him, because he is an impressive football coach. And I do think he will be an NFL head coach one day. I don't think this is the ideal situation for somebody to prove themselves as a head coaching candidate. He's put in a very difficult position. He's made the best of it. I don't think that Sunday in San Francisco was his best effort as a head coach, and certainly not the best effort by a team trying to prove that they wanted to win for him or win for their coaching staff. That was as bad of an effort as the Bears have turned in all season long. So Thomas Brown, I agree with you. His press conferences were the kind of thing that you want to see in a market like Chicago, and also the kind of behavior you want to see a head coach exhibit, because they're passionate, they were authentic, and really they were eloquent. So you want your head coach to be all of those things. I just don't think it's a great situation right now for his team, his time. I think that time will come, but he's a young man relatively in the coaching, profession. So I think that he'll just have to wait a little bit longer.
I've been listening to pundits talk about who could potentially or should potentially be the next head coach of the Chicago Bears. and one person, a former scout for, and I'm forgetting his name right now, brain cramp, but he said that this team needs a culture change. And I agree with that, given that there's been so much losing and that the players appear to be fed up with losing. We all know the stories that have happened in locker room tirades, but we're also seeing it on the field now that this is a team that's not confident, that they're expecting the worst. What do you think of the idea of I hate to say it, but a Mike Ditka type coach to come in and kick ass and turn this culture around?
Well, whether it's Mike Ditka or Mike Tomlin, I think you have a wide range of examples where you're talking about essentially the same thing. Somebody with a strong personality who doesn't necessarily have an expertise on either side of the football, and I would think that that'd be the direction I would lean for a franchise that had success going that direction at one point in time, a very long time ago, but also is at the point in time where you have a locker room full of guys that probably need that approach as much as anything. I respect the fact that there will be those that argue, I think logically that an offensive-minded head coach and an offensive play caller would make sense given the fact that you have a franchise quarterback at long last. But I also think that a guy who is able to command the room, command respect, and make decisive decisions in crunch time, that's as appealing as anything. Not have a team that's undisciplined, not have a team that is unfocused, and certainly not have a team that is non-physical. You need to have a violent, physical, tough football team, both physically and mentally. And you find me that coach, and I'll show you a winner.
Caleb Williams, once you kind of look through all of the blemishes, you see a quarterback who is accomplishing some really good things statistically and also in just passing the eye test, right? So my question to you is, are you worried that the dysfunction in the organization might impact his growth?
I really don't worry about the dysfunction in the organization impacting his growth. And I know that's probably a minority opinion. We could argue that the dysfunction in the organization is responsible for Caleb Williams' stunted growth, for the Bears' bad season, and for traffic on the Edens. I mean, you could talk about a lot of things that the Bears are responsible for and blame them for everything. But I do think this: Caleb Williams is not only a special talent, but to me strikes me as a special young man. I do think he's able to transcend some of this nonsense. And I don't want to say that he's Bears proof necessarily, but he does strike me as one of these guys that will come through your organization and be able to withstand or absorb the kind of things that you're describing. So not ideal. I wouldn't recommend it, and you certainly wouldn't want it on any number one draft pick overall. But I'm also not worried about him being affected long-term by this. I'm more concerned about them protecting him over the final 4 games and getting him time to throw so he doesn't set a new sack record, because those are the kinds of bad habits that are more difficult to overcome, the kinds of things that happen on the field as a result of the dysfunction. So mentally, no. Physically, maybe.
Yeah. This is the Chicago Bears schedule, and on the lower right-hand corner, weeks 15, 16, 17, and 18, it's the Vikings, Lions, Seahawks, and Packers. A formidable schedule. You just talked about protecting Caleb Williams. At what point do you start to consider maybe Tyson Bagent should get a shot here to run this offense and protect our quarterback?
Yeah, I'm not one of those guys. I'm not one of those guys that believes in getting out the bubble wrap and putting your quarterbacks or your prized possessions in there. I understand that because that's part of the nature of the conversation about pro sports these days. And I totally get wanting to protect your assets, but I don't think that. And I'm a Tyson Bagent guy. I really like his story and everything about him. But Caleb Williams is a young quarterback that needs reps, and I think that he needs experience and he needs a frame of reference, and he also has pride, and I think he would not want to sit down if he wasn't forced to sit down. So I think you have a decision maybe to discuss. I don't know if you have a decision to make. Certainly it's part of the conversation, but I don't think it's part of the conclusion.
Getting back to Ryan Poles momentarily, we've had debates here on throughout the Barroom Network and our various shows that Ryan Poles made a mistake building the team outside in instead of inside out. I grew up uh, being a Bears fan when Jim Finks started the draft and was building at the trenches, and so I've always felt like that was the way to build a winning team. What is your philosophy? You played defensive back in college, and so what is your philosophy? Do you take best player available, even though the best player might be someone in the defensive backfield, as opposed to a comparable or in your scoring evaluation of the player? Maybe perhaps he's a little lower because for whatever reason.
People probably would call me over the years maybe a football traditionalist or somebody that is a little bit more of a throwback conventional football guy because I do believe that you can still win with a good defense, a strong running game, and ball protection. I think those are my football sensibilities for whatever reason. I do think that Ryan Poles, for a lot of reasons that are understandable. I mean, you draft a wide receiver to pair with your quarterback, and you can look at the Bengals, and they did it, and all those kinds of things. I also am surprised that he did it that way because of his background and past. So he played college football too, and he was an offensive lineman. So I don't know if we favor what we played or however we justify our decisions, but I think Ryan Poles made the wrong one because I do think you start from the ball and you move on out, and the Bears are going to have to take that approach as a result of not having taken that approach now because they have no other choice. They need to rebuild the offensive line. They need to rebuild the defensive line. And I think when they do that, we'll see where they are skill-wise. For years in Chicago, as you know, although we've been cursed with an offense that doesn't have a lot of skilled position players. I mean, and certainly have been searching for the quarterback forever. So I get the reasons, but I do also think it was a miscalculation because they left the offensive line bare, and a lot of the risks that were calculated risks didn't pay off. The Nate Davis experiment, the Ryan Bates pursuit, the drafting of Kieran Amangaji did not work out well. So those are mistakes against Ryan Poles and reasons why we're talking about their need to now prioritize the offensive line.
All right, in the last few minutes that I have you here, I'd like to turn our attention to the sports media landscape. And I'm like you, I'm a traditionalist. When I was in junior high school, I would go over to the corner store and I would buy every Chicago newspaper available, and there were 4 of them. And I would go over to the park and I'd always start from the sports pages and then get to the front pages. Hey, Watergate, what's this about? But I just love journalism, and especially sports journalism. Now, sports journalism has evolved over time, and I, for one, am lamenting those old days. And I don't want to sound like an old fart, but if you wanted reliable news, good reporting, and in fact, you exhibited that in the very first question that I asked you. You answered that like a true journalist. You weren't going to lend opinions to certain things that you weren't aware of or weren't certain of. You answered it like a true pro. Now, of course, we've got bloggers pretending to be newsmen. We've got people sending out social media posts saying that this happened when it really didn't happen. How do you feel about the media landscape right now, particularly for sports?
It's concerning. It's concerning because I do think that there's been a lowering of the standards, whether it's ethical or otherwise. Accuracy doesn't matter the way it once did. I don't think the training is in place, and I certainly think the economic climate has created situation where the jobs aren't as desired and aren't as well compensated. So you're going to get a lowering in salaries, you're going to get a lowering in standards, and you're going to get a lowering in quality. So that decline is troublesome because I am somebody that I'm a trained journalist, and I say that in a way kind of as nostalgic as you sound too. I long for those days. I had my dream job for 17 years. I was at the Chicago Tribune. That's the only place I ever wanted to work. And that was the only job I ever really wanted to do. And I miss those days every single day. I'm fortunate because I was able to pivot and adjust and kind of evolve into a radio guy who talks until he thinks of something to say, and a TV guy who is able to take advantage of an opportunity. But I miss the good old days. I do. And I think that I'm a reporter who was lucky enough to become a columnist, who was lucky enough to become somebody who was on different mediums. But I also think I understand what's going on here. Newspapers, the business model is dead, and it's an industry that is dying. And I respect every friend I still have in the industry because of their ability to try to stick it out. But it's a hard grind of a job because people don't respect that medium as much as they used to. And certainly, I do think that's where you get the truest, reporting. You're going to see a lot of stuff come out, and you already have, about the decline of the Bears, the demise of the Bears. The Athletic does a terrific job. Our guys at the Tribune, Brad Biggs, Dan Weeder, and Colin Kane, they do a terrific job. The Sun-Times guys I respect. You do have people still fighting a good fight, covering the Bears and covering sports media, or covering sports in the media. But I'm with you. There's nothing like on a Sunday where the paper used to be this thick instead of like a pamphlet now, and you still pay like $8 for something that you never really thought you'd ever pay $8 for. So I miss the good old days. The only thing I would say to people is, just try to, in the business, just try to evolve and adapt as best you can. Understand it's a changing landscape and you're going to have to change yourself. And if you're able to try to do that, respect each step along the way, you'll adjust and adapt as best you can.
Yeah, and I want to say to our viewers and listeners, trust the sources that have gone through the process of becoming journalists. I get sent a lot of stuff. Hey, is this true? And it's from Joe Blow, NFL rumors or whatever the source is. And I'm like, if it's not coming from a trusted source, find your trusted sources and then follow them and forget the rest of the noise. You will help the business. You will help the things that you complain about the media. You will actually help if you follow guys like David Haugh. Do you still do writing for Odyssey? Don't you do a column after every game?
Yeah, I cover the Bears games, and sometimes if there's a big news story, I'll write a column, and just to stay sharp at it. And I do enjoy those days. Like if after the Bears game Sunday against the 49ers, I wrote a column, and unfortunately they start to sound alike, and you start to say, I've written this column before several dozen times.
Yeah, the guy who, John Buffone, who is the nephew of Doug Buffone, does a show called Buffone 55 on our network here. And he says, Aldo, I feel like I'm saying the same thing every week. We got to figure out a new way to say this stuff. Yeah. And he's right. David, I really appreciate this moment, and not just for the Barroom Network and my show, but just personally. I've been following your career since you started at the Tribune and really enjoy your work. You are one of those trusted voices I turn to when there's news, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you for 20 minutes or so.
Thank you for saying that, and thank you for reading and listening and watching all the years, and I really appreciate you asking me today.
You got it.